It's year 2 for Sean Payton in Denver, and he's got a first-round quarterback to work with. How good can the Broncos be? We're examining the state of the Broncos roster today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who make Locked On NFL Scouting your first listen every single day, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much.
Joe, vamos gatos.
Vamos gatos.
It's the Wednesday show.
Right.
But as we said on the Tuesday show, we recorded the Tuesday show on Monday before the Stanley Cup final. And Canada still has not won a Stanley Cup.
What a shame. It's your sport.
Right? And all the ownership in it.
Yeah.
And not only did you lose in Game 7, I didn't realize 5 of the last 7 Canadian team appearances went to Game 7 and they lost them all by 1 goal.
Oh, that's sad.
But now you lost to a team who lives closer to the equator.
Yeah.
Like the polar opposite of ice hockey, right?
Right. Yeah. It's incredible.
Yeah. It was a fun game on Monday night.
Yeah, I actually made it. I stayed awake, which was
through the second halftime.
Made it through the second halftime. I was nervous.
I'm not happy with you with that.
Right, but that's the whole point, though. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, I really don't know anything about hockey, but I'm going to watch this game because I want to and I'm entitled to. But yeah, I was rooting for Florida for that reason. I didn't want the Canadian team to win, but also Florida's got a lot of former Sabres players, several. And Sam Reinhart, their key guy, was a former top pick by the Sabres, and just his career has found himself. You want to talk about bad organizations? It's the Buffalo Sabres. I mean, just good players all over the league that are winning cups all over the place. They used to play for the Sabres at the same time. They couldn't figure it out. They got a significant playoff drought. I think it's maybe 15, 16 years. We're not here to talk about that, though. Florida Panthers, Stanley Cup champions.
Yeah. And the last thing that I would say in that regard is the power of you and I rooting for a South Florida team
undefeated
at the same time.
Yeah.
We need to find more instances of
those are few and far between.
Because when it happens, good things happen.
Yeah, I have. What's the line here? You and I've never watched a Dolphins game with you that they lost, right?
Correct.
And then we went to Dolphins Ravens.
Ravens 2021.
Yeah, Tua came in is it his rookie season?
No, it was his second
season came in.
Could have played the week prior against the Texans, and they sat him anyway. And then he sat and he played golf that morning because he was told he was going to be inactive, and then he wasn't inactive, and then he got put in at halftime, and they won the game.
Yeah, so between he made some throws, but then also Flores in the defense, just Lamar had nothing for it, right? Justin Tucker missed a field goal. It was incredible, and I predicted that would happen. But the point being, I put some money in the game. I said the Dolphins are winning this game tonight. In the parking lot of Hard Rock Stadium. So they're winning this game. I'm taking the money line. It's probably the biggest payout I've ever had for a bet.
Because they were bad, and Baltimore at the time was a top 3 record in football at that time. It was a mid-season game.
Yeah.
So so you and I rooting for South Florida sports, good things happen. So let's find a team, whether it's in the soccer team. They have Messi, so we can attach ourselves to that if we want to. But let's figure it out. But right now, let's figure out how to transition and get on track to the Denver Broncos.
We don't want them yelling at us here like some of these other fan bases yelling at us if we don't start talking about their team quick enough for their liking. But it is your day here, Broncos country. Let's ride. Let's talk about your football team. Every summer, Kyle Crabbs and I, we study every roster. We watch the film. We study the players. We put every player in a bucket And those buckets are roster cornerstone, quality starter, rookie, adequate starter, replacement level, quality depth, non-roster caliber, incomplete evaluation, and practice squad developmental player. Each bucket has points assigned to it, and it's weighted for positional value. And at the end of this process, we are able to rank and score all the position groups and all the rosters, and we show our work all the steps of the way. And we have a division and a half left to go. Like, we have been through a lot.
Done next week.
Yeah, we'll be done next week. So this is AFC West week. It's Denver's turn. Kyle Crabbs, as we transition to the offensive side of the football for Denver, your prevailing thought with this unit?
Sean Payton's going to have to do the lifting, in my mind. And what I mean by that is I look at whether it's Jarrett Stidham or Zach Wilson or Bo Nix, and you kind of hope that it's Bo Nix with it was a top 15 pick. You felt like that was a good fit player within that system and will execute the play as it's designed, which is the polar opposite of what Denver has had the last 2 years with Russ, and the whole turns out let Russ cook things not a good idea because he doesn't follow the recipe, right? He just starts grabbing ingredients and throwing them in the pot and see what comes out of the oven at the end, right? Like,
I was going to say run the offense, but I think you had a much better way to say that.
Yeah, right? So
goes rogue.
Sean is so well regarded as being one of the best play callers in football. And if you have somebody who runs the play that you call, it helps you as the play caller make good plays, right? But I look at the talent element of Denver, and you just wish there was a little bit more aside of Cortland Sutton in the way of proven NFL commodities. Now, Javonte Williams looked promising, suffered an injury, wasn't himself last year. I think that was really apparent. What does that look like? They look like they got a nice steal in Jaleel McLaughlin as another running back to kind of be a part of that mix. They've got Estime from Notre Dame as another power back where you should have some ability to run the ball, okay, between your quick guy in McLaughlin and then your power guys. If Cortland Sutton on the outside is a downfield type receiver, you have a speedy guy in Marvin Mims, who's a second-year player who never really felt like he got started last year, even though it felt like every time he touched the football, good things happen. It's just, for a young quarterback coming in, if you were going to be like, hey, he's really loaded to the nines, you'd wish that there was more for him to work with. But I think some of that gets mitigated by Sean Payton being your play caller, as long as you run the plays as they're designed to be run.
Yeah, I think he's got a quarterback that'll do that.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm hopeful that Bo Nix starts right away. Partly because I think that he will do that, come in and execute the offense. But I mean, we're talking about Jarrett Stidham or Zach Wilson. It's wasted.
What are you doing with your time otherwise?
Yeah, it's wasted reps. You got to go. That's the thing. You have the offensive line. I know that we have a transition at center with Lloyd Cushenberry. What team is he on? Titans now? He's on the
Titans.
Yeah,
I think it's a $12 or $13 million a year deal.
Big, yeah. I mean, developed him wonderfully, and he moves on. But you certainly have investments in Ben Powers and Mike McGlinchey as your left guard and right tackle. I think your best players are your homegrown guys and Garrett Bolles and Quinn Meinerz up front. Yeah. And, Quinn Meinerz is knocking on the door being one of the best guards in the NFL. So now you got to figure out center. And, Luke Wattenberger is, I guess, the transition plan. I know you have Alex Forsythe as well. So we need that center position to come together. But the point being is I think that offensive line is going to give Bo Nix a chance to execute the offense. And Bo Nix is a quick decision maker, and he makes good, quick second reaction decisions as well.
And he could win outside of structure a little bit too. So you feel good about it.
Yeah. And I mean, for the receivers and stuff like Cortland Sutton, part of the mix, I'm really hoping to see Marvin Mims get more opportunity. I was such a big fan of him coming out of Oklahoma, and felt like whenever he got chances to make plays, he was really dynamic. I'm hoping he's a bigger part of this equation. And then I think you're just looking for like one of Josh Reynolds or Tim Patrick to kind of be another answer. But boy, would we go ahead.
I was just going to say, we haven't mentioned Troy Franklin's name yet. Obviously, day 3 pick, there was some perception that he would be drafted earlier. I think the best thing that they have going, if somebody else is going to emerge, it's Troy Franklin's got a bunch of pre-existing chemistry with Bo Nix because they played together.
Yeah, especially some of the vertical stuff maybe that you'd be liking there. But I mean, Troy Franklin, to his credit, I thought that at Oregon, like he was the go-to guy. Like maybe you have questions about projecting him to the NFL. At Oregon, that was the dude. Like for years, they went to him all the time, short, deep, yards after catch, down the field, and he was a big part of their recipe. So that's a nice introduction to this Broncos offense. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the O-line depth, maybe the tight end position before we get to the defense. Yeah. We'll do all that on the other side of it, so be sure to stick with us. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Tight ends. Yeah. So Adam Troutman is obviously best friends with Sean Payton. Between him and Lil Jordan Humphrey, I don't think Sean Payton could coach a season without these guys with him, right? So big part of, there's always those guys like, right, Jihad Ward and Wink Martindale.
They know the system.
Right.
They got the trade someone.
Jim Leonard and Rex Ryan.
With it. And that's it.
Part of the deal. I know you feel the same way. We like Greg Dulcich a lot. The hamstring thing, man, like whatever needs to happen there. And I know that I think he went and saw some consultants to see if he can get this figured. I know there's been some other hamstring guys with like chronic hamstring issues, and they're learning a lot about why. And I hope that gets figured out with Greg Dulcich, because I think he's a dimension for this offense that you don't find in Lucas Kroll, you don't find in Adam Troutman. Like, I think he has the potential to be one of the better receiving tight ends in the NFL if he can be available for this football team. So big time fingers crossed there for Greg Dulcich.
Yeah. And they would certainly really prosper from having what he's capable of being and actually realizing that potential. I think that would add a whole new element versus like that's how we are grading these units right now, is off of what we know right now. And you look at what we know right now, Troy Franklin's never played snaps in the NFL. Marvin Mims was kind of touch and go, and Josh Reynolds has, you know what the ceiling is and the floor is with Josh Reynolds, and the floor's good, right? But the ceiling's not great. Yeah. Is if he's going to be one of your primary perimeter receivers, you'd like that a little bit more ceiling there. Cortland Sutton's been an impactful NFL player. Greg Dulcich, what he's capable of being totally evolves what their pass catching group looks like, but it's got to happen.
Yeah.
And it's either going to happen or it's not. And if it does, here's some insight for any Broncos fans that are newer to the show. We do bold predictions every summer. And I think my bold prediction last year for Denver was that Greg Dulcich was going to be one of like the top target getters based off of who they had. And obviously that didn't happen because of Greg Dulcich's hamstring. But I think that highly of him as a player. And you mentioned one of the more productive receiving tight ends in football. I think he has the ceiling to be that kind of guy.
Another thing I'd like to point out with this Broncos offense is I think they have a good looking starting offensive line. I'm not liking the idea of anyone getting injured here. I think this is a team that offensive line depth is a concern for me. I don't like the mix. I don't think there's a lot of experience. I think when these guys have had to play like a Throckmorton or a Matt Pert, I think they've struggled. I don't see quality O-line 6 or 7 in this mix. So let's stay healthy up front.
Well, and they achieved that last year, right? So that was kind of the thing, is as that season went along, those guys really benefited from all of the time on task that they collected together. There's a law of averages element that you're worried about to some degree. But if they can achieve the same thing in back-to-back years, you applaud, you clap your hands, and they'll probably be in good hands if that's the case. But any extended missed time for any of the starters, and I'd probably be a little anxious. And, that might be a team that should be looking over when we get to 53-man cuts.
Yeah.
Like there will be teams, there's a few teams that have some depth on the offensive line that I think like they're ninth guy that might not make the team, would crack the top 8 for what Denver has as far as a depth perspective.
Kyle, one of my takeaways in doing this project with you this summer is you are just keenly aware of teams that had good offensive line health and those that didn't. You know, I can't put my finger on why.
Nine guys played 400+ snaps last year for my Miami Dolphins.
Kyle, like, man, must be nice. Wow, all your offensive linemen were healthy every time.
Yeah, and nothing irritates me more than seeing this game referenced on social media in June of 2024. But the only game where all 5 of the Dolphins starters played on the offensive line last year, guess what game it was?
Oh, boy.
The game against Denver.
Not this one, was it?
Yeah. It's the only game all 5 starters played the entire season.
Well, I think the Denver Broncos defense is still having nightmares about crack toss against the Miami Dolphins, but
they've overhauled some. That could be a nice transition. They overhauled some pieces on the defense side of the ball that I think can help with the run defense. They averaged 5 yards per carry allowed defensively last year, and if you're looking for places to get better as we get ready to switch over to that side of the ball, that's a great place to start. And anything else left on offense, or can we go there?
Yeah, we should go there, dude. They couldn't stop the AFC East was a problem for them to stop the run. 350 on the ground to the Dolphins, 234 to the Jets.
I'm not doing this. Joe Marino.
192 to the Bills, 59 to the Patriots.
Good old Patriots. They had a rough go against the AFC East. The only game that they won was that crazy finish with Buffalo, right?
Yeah, that was
the missed field goal game, or they got the extra
too many men
kick
on the field. Yeah.
It's a dumb sport we watch.
Dumb. There it is. That's where the margin was.
I love the addition of John Franklin Myers to this defensive front. When you consider all of the guys that they had on the edge, and they kind of have a type, right? The Vance Joseph type. And you got Jonathan Cooper, and you got Jonah Ellis in the draft this year, and you got Nik Bonitto, and you got Baron Browning. They'll kind of feel like the same physical build and type to a certain degree, right? You know what John Franklin Myers is not? That. Yeah, so if you're going to run crack toss on the Broncos, and you got to crack John Franklin Myers as compared to cracking one of these guys that is lightning in a bottle, but they're not overly dense, I think it just gives you a little bit more stiffness at the point of attack to the formational strength. And I really like that addition for Denver, and they got him for nothing. They got him for a bag of chips from the Jets.
Yeah, that was a weird trade, right? Like,
yeah. Seemed like there was some stuff with the Jets and Franklin there. I don't know what's going on with the Jets and their edge group, but not too many happy guys in that. What room.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. It's exactly the type of player they needed off the edge. He's a good starter, man. I am happy to see him away from the Jets and a very useful addition to Denver. I like this edge group. There's a lot of depth to it, but
and potential.
Yeah, man. Like, you got some Bonitto, Browning. Like, those guys are bursty, bendy dudes. Yeah. You got the heavy hands guy now and a Franklin Myers. Jonah Ellis adds to this. I think Malcolm Roach is an underrated addition to this football team. Like a weird body type, but man, he is so firm at the point of attack. And I think that allows them, like players like Malcolm Roach, you're going to want to run games up front with these defensive linemen. Yeah. And having a guy like that is going to be huge for that. In addition to like Zach Allen, I was critical of that signing. I thought it was a bit of an overpay, but I mean, joke's on me. I thought he had a really good debut season in Denver, and I think obviously he can build upon that. So I think there's some things to work with up front. I'm not you don't look at this group and find one of the elite caliber interior players or edge rushers, but I think they have just like a collection of very, very solid players that can play well off of each other. And I think that they can attack the pocket in a lot of unique ways with this group.
Yeah. I mean, even you mentioned the interior guys. Maybe you wish you had like another anchor type build.
Yeah.
But they got guys that can get in the backfield.
I think they think they're counting on Blackson to be that. And I think that's questionable, but
I guess the good news is if you wanted to tap into interior defensive line free agency, because we did it when we did the Bears last week.
Yeah.
The guys that are still out there are the guys that can compete with Angelo Blackson to be your productive A-gap, sit at the line of scrimmage, keep guys around you clean and free. Although they do have some size and physicality at linebacker to play behind their defensive line, which I think helps to some degree too. Like Alex Singleton, I think he can play in traffic fairly well. I don't think he's overly dynamic in space. I do think they downgraded the other spot with Josie Jewell to Cody Barton. But there's a physicality element with these linebackers that I think is a little bit different than most of we got 220-pound guys out there that are going to run around and can play in space and hit your coverage drops. Now that bleeds into the secondary as far as what the responsibilities are going to be for the secondary. But if you look at the spine of this defense, I think the linebackers that they have make sense behind the defensive line type of players that they have to play on the interior. So I think that it's logical with the fits in that regard.
Cody Barton, Alex Singleton, two guys that will stick their face in a fan and like it. All right, we are going to talk about the secondary and tie a ribbon on this Broncos conversation, so be sure to stick with us.
Very bummed out for Drew Sanders, though.
Yeah, you thought maybe there was a big role right there for him to take this year.
And maybe I'm sure that was the plan, right? As Sanders is the starter with Josie Jewell leaving, and now you have two players that are a little bit more Alex Singleton type build with the length, and he's a little bit more bursty and it's versatile to get up on the edge a little bit. And his loss, that sucks for him, and it sucks for Denver because the flashes at Arkansas were so good.
Some things I like about this corner room, I think that obviously starts with a cornerstone player and Patrick Surtain the second. I think about the corner market and just the way that those salaries are going. You just saw
Antoine Winfield Jr.
Well,
reset the defensive back market.
Right, but I corner specifically like L'Jarius Sneed and Jalen Johnson last year, it was 19. I think you look at Pat Surtain and you look at Sauce Gardner as the two big opportunities that the corner market has to drive that up, and I'd expect that to be the case, right? These are going to be your 20, into your $20 million a year corners.
They'll get more than Winfield, right?
I think so. That
was the big win for Winfield was, hey, we reset the defensive back market, and I'm a safety, and it's 21. And it's crazy that has been that static for that long amidst all of the other rising positions, right? There's some fascinating stuff I'm sure we could get into in there as far as where pay is accelerating and why versus one of the more traditional. If you took every traditional premium position in football, quarterback, offensive tackle, edge rushers, and corners, is it fair to say
wide receiver?
Well, wide receiver is kind of the new age premium position, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you don't include that in this, but it's like, hey, those are your traditional premium positions are tackles, edge rushers, quarterbacks, and corners. Far and away, the pay at corner has been stuck in the mud versus these other positions. It's crazy. But Surtain would deserve every cent of whatever market reset contract he gets is the point we're making. I'm glad they didn't trade him.
Right. Yeah, and I thought that was always silly. I'm like, people were talking about that. I think a lot of other fan bases were romanticizing about the idea of getting Patrick Surtain. I'm like, guys, this is one of the best young corners in the league. That's multiple first-round picks, and why on earth would Denver, candidly, as a team that's made some personnel decisions along the way, trade away one of the best things that they've done?
You need the Jalen Ramsey package when he went to the Rams from Jacksonville. That's the kind of magnitude of a deal that you would need to get that done.
Jaquan McMillan, it looks like he's going to be an answer for this team in the slot, really come along for them last year. I think that other cornerback spot's going to be important. Last year, Damari Mathis was a disaster. They put in Fabian Moreau that elevated the defense. But now they're kind of looking at Levi Wallace, who comes over from the Steelers. And then if I'm Denver, I'm hoping that Riley Moss wins the job, right? As a third-round pick.
That athleticism
is
huge.
Yeah, because Levi Wallace is stay leverage, zone, off coverage, but like
player.
Brother, there's just matchup restrictions, right? With his physical limitations.
Well,
so
and let's be fair to you mentioned leverage, and I think that the competitors for that spot, what makes it such an interesting position battle. Riley Moss playing at Iowa is a zone vision-based player, right? So, okay, you have a guy who has thrived in the NFL based off of his instincts and feel and taking good angles, and Levi Wallace, maybe not thrive, but like his entire career has been built off of that and playing in zone coverage. And Riley Moss played in the zone heavy scheme, but has these transcendent athletic tools. He's an outstanding athlete. So it's like, what's going to win that spot for Denver? And I think that's what makes it a really interesting battle, because their strengths, despite their backgrounds, both playing in zone-based systems, are very, very different.
We think of this safety tandem, PJ Locke, Brandon Jones coming over from Miami, decent contract there. Obviously, it's a transition, right? Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson for a while was the duo here. They said goodbye. We're transitioning here. How do you feel about this safety tandem?
Kind of hope Caden Stearns kind of finds the enthusiasm that they had for him once upon a time. And he hasn't played a lot of football the last couple of years. There's been some injury issues. I don't love the Brandon Jones contract, if I'm being honest. I've had a firsthand look at Brandon Jones. I was surprised he had as big of a market as he did. When he's at his best, he's low. He's close to the line of scrimmage. You blitz him off the edge. You use him in pressure packages. You don't utilize him in a lot of man coverage. And I wouldn't play him in the high post all that much. So that's, as long as your expectations are properly aligned with what you're getting for Brandon Jones, go out and make the most of what he is as a player. And I certainly think Vance Joseph can do that. But and maybe it's just the drop off from Justin Simmons, where I look at that room and I say, I'd like it if there's a little bit more there to work with, if I'm being honest.
I'd like to kind of close on this thought if we can, taking it back to kind of where you started things with Sean Payton. And, you know, he's a top end coach in the NFL. And I think you look at the journey that this team took last year in 2023. They're really kind of a rough start. They started 1-5, and they took some bad losses to the Raiders, to the Commanders. Those are home losses. They lost at home to the Jets. And then, of course, you know, the Miami game, 1-5. They transitioned that into an 8-9 finish. Like, they got a lot better in season. And that was jump-started with a 3-game win streak against the Packers, Chiefs, and Bills. Like, those are all teams that won playoff games last year. You beat them. That was a 5-game win streak that was actually jump-started, I thought, by that 8-19 loss to Kansas City, where it was like a tight game and nothing really seemed super competitive for them in the first few weeks of the season. And so you saw the tide shift a bit. And I would be, if I'm a Broncos fan, I'm excited to parlay that into this season, where everything you talked about with running the offense and what Bo Nix can be there. I think it's a better roster in a lot of ways. And Sean Payton, his fingerprints are deeper on this operation. And Sean Payton's one of those coaches that, like, he's going to kind of get it set the way he wants it. And I think for them to finish how they did, for him to have another offseason of building, I think it's going to position them, you know, to maybe even take another jump this season.
Well, yeah, and it was really hard for me personally to put my thumb on exactly where Denver was throughout a lot of that season, because, like, anybody on your timeline telling you Russell Wilson had more touchdowns than Patrick Mahomes last year, like, you're telling on yourself.
Yeah,
right. It's an outrageous to watch the game, to understand what's trying to be accomplished and how he played the entire time he was there. And it makes it really difficult to get a feel for where a lot of your guys are at and where the grasp of the concepts is, and how the familiarity is building, because it was just so erratic and unsustainable. So I'm glad they did the hard thing this year, take their lumps with it. They'll be through it in 2025 with the post-June 1st money once that clears for the 2025 cap. So, like, you'll be fresh slate in 2026. You've got a young quarterback now. You took advantage of your draft position to do. Evaluate, right? And maybe this isn't the year that Denver becomes the playoff team, but as they kind of push the residuals of that out, I think you make a great point. They did finish strong. It's what, 7-4 finish for them?
Yep.
And the 3 games that they lost in the final 4 weeks, or that looked like they were going to be in the playoff picture, you had to go to Detroit. Detroit was humming at that point in time. You just didn't really have the horses to keep up. And you get in a late game with New England and they suffocate you defensively because you're not doing anything you're supposed to be doing offensively. And then you get a couple late scores to make it interesting. And then they kick a game-winning field goal. I think this year will provide a lot of clarity for a lot more players than just Russ, which is what last year felt like it was a lot about for me.
I think it's important to like, you got to the whole NFC. I mean, really the NFL, but the AFC West in general. You have the Chiefs in your division, right? There's a long play here, and yeah. I think this feels like a good step from where they were last year.
Yep, and we'll see what Sean does with it. But that is going to do it for us. We have the Chargers next here on Locked On NFL Scouting. That comes tomorrow. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Make it a great rest of your day. We are out of here.